On February 20th of this year, Roger Stone will be sentenced for his participation in the 2016 campaign to elect Donald Trump as president. While the Department of Justice is seeking to reduce the potential sentence, prosecutors are calling for up to 9 years in prison for the 67-year-old political maverick. In America, where punishments are constitutionally bound to fit the crime, depriving someone of nearly a decade of their lives is reserved for only the most heinous of crimes. By comparison, sentencing guidelines in California stipulates a 3, 6, or 8-year sentence for the crime of rape. In Maryland, the punishment for voluntary manslaughter is a maximum of 10 years. In Texas, the crime of kidnapping carries only 2 years of mandatory imprisonment. Jeffrey Epstein was busted running an underage sex trafficking and blackmail bribery scheme involving at least 40 teenage girls, and he was sentenced to only 13 months in a work release program where he got to leave the jail every morning. The former CEO of Heinous Therapeutics pled guilty to conducting a bribery scheme that destroyed an untold number of lives by getting them addicted to opioids. His sentence? A little over 2 years. So what did Roger Stone do to deserve a jail sentence more harsh than rape, murder, sex trafficking, and causing the opioid crisis? Why, it's quite simple. He challenged the system. In a world where those who serve the system are permitted to lie, cheat, and steal with impunity, those who stand up against the machine will find themselves surveilled, threatened, slandered, their every right to privacy or due process trampled over by authorities as they inflict the greatest possible punishment for the slightest misbehavior. Their livelihoods taken from them, their bank accounts emptied, their doors kicked in by the FBI on national television, paraded in front of the cameras in handcuffs, shouted down by hateful mobs, legally denied the ability to even speak out in your own defense, finally to be judged by a panel of your longtime political rivals and sentenced by an activist judge. Roger Stone's case is not just a travesty of justice, it's emblematic of the utter collapse of rule of law in modern America. In this special report, I will be laying out exactly how we arrived at this point, who's involved, how they operate, and how this one anti-establishment kingpin became the center of the greatest miscarriage of justice in the history of American politics. This is the trial of Roger Stone. The trial of Roger Stone is not just about punishment far outweighing a crime. It's about the political partisan rot that infects our institutions and how a politicized judicial system has robbed Roger Stone of the fair trial that is his due. We'll begin our story just over a year ago on the morning of January 25th, 2019. As the sun rose on Fort Lauderdale, Florida, more than a dozen FBI agents moved in on Roger Stone's home. A cadre of agents dressed in military SWAT gear approached his door and began to bang, shouting, "FBI, open your door."
FBI, open the door.
Now, all of this was broadcast live on CNN, who had camera crews set up and rolling in preparation for the arrest.
Allison, an extraordinary morning. We were here at 5 a.m. waiting for whatever was going to happen.
Now, typically, such a heavy-handed tactic would never be used with such a high-profile individual, especially one who posed no threats. The authorities usually negotiate with the lawyers to turn themselves in, something Stone had, in fact, offered to do. But this was not a simple arrest. No, this was a made-for-TV production, a collaboration between the nation's spy agencies and the news media designed to humiliate their victim. They paraded Roger out in handcuffs for all the world to see. It was as devious as it was unnecessary, but this wouldn't be the last time the system would conspire to bring down Roger Stone. And it certainly wasn't the first. In fact, if we trace the winding trail of events that have led to his arrest, we find a path replete with conniving politicians, dirty cops, and traitorous secret agents. Roger was arrested in connection to 5 felony counts of lying to investigators, 1 count of obstructing a congressional probe, and 1 count of witness tampering, all having to do with Robert Mueller's investigation, which of course we now know was simply a continuation of the FBI's so-called Crossfire Hurricane project, the insurance policy launched by the previous administration to handicap and undermine Donald Trump's political campaign. The entire investigation itself was a baseless sham, founded on lies and carried out by corrupt agents for partisan purposes. And untangling that nefarious web of deception is a task unto itself. But suffice it to say that By January of 2017, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, chaired by Devin Nunes with ranking member Adam Schiff, announced an inquiry into Russian activities and intentions in recent U.S. elections. Roger Stone was called to testify in front of this committee in May and September of 2017, and it's from this testimony that the indictments were drawn.
I expressed my view that I am aware of no evidence whatsoever of collusion by the Russian state or anyone in the Trump campaign.
Roger Stone was questioned about his knowledge of the DNC email dumps carried out by WikiLeaks throughout the summer and fall of 2016. In other words, the public revelation of quite damning information about the nefarious doings of the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton, including her chairman, John Podesta. As evidenced by the indictment itself, Roger Stone had no personal contact with Julian Assange or WikiLeaks, receiving only vague and frankly often incorrect indications about their work through an intermediary. The communication consisted largely of publicly available information in the form of tweets and news articles. Julian Assange, the intermediary, and Roger, by the way, are all journalist or public speaking figures, and the only two examples of communication with someone inside the Trump campaign itself consisted of, again, publicly available information. Now, as for the charge of witness tampering, the witness himself wrote a letter to Amy Berman Jackson, the judge, saying he never once felt threatened by Roger Stone, emphatically so. But that didn't matter. The deep state had its sight set on destroying Roger Stone. Facts and reality be damned. Now, we have to remember that the only evidence linking the DNC hack and subsequent WikiLeaks to the Russian government was provided by the private security firm CrowdStrike. The FBI was actually barred by the DNC from investigating the claim themselves, so the only proof it was connected at all to the Russians was provided by this far less than neutral private company. In fact, CrowdStrike's general counsel and chief risk officer, Stephen Chabinsky, was appointed by President Obama to a presidential commission for enhancing cybersecurity in April of 2016, further demonstrating CrowdStrike's intermingling with the very Democratic Party factions that started this whole Russia collusion canard to begin with. Now, this is a common pattern in the Russia collusion myth. In fact, the entire surveillance program Crossfire Hurricane was predicated on information provided by partisan private firm Fusion GPS. And this was information the FBI knew was false, but nevertheless used as a basis for their FISA warrant. Now, as for the purpose of the HPSCI's inquiry, it was to investigate Russian cyber activity. So without this tenuous link provided by partisan actors at CrowdStrike, the entire line of investigation is without foundation. Absent that, what we're talking about here are independent journalists unaffiliated with the Trump campaign discussing publicly available information about leaked documents that Roger Stone neither helped obtain nor publish. So in a world where Hillary Clinton can violate a subpoena by destroying her devices with a hammer, James Comey can leak information to the press at will, and James Clapper can openly lie to Congress no less than 4 times about violations of our most fundamental rights, all without the slightest whiff of punishment or backlash. Why is a private citizen having his life destroyed over misremembered dates and uncooperative testimony? Because the system protects itself and ravages challengers. Had Roger Stone been in Hillary's camp, he would have no doubt received blanket immunity like Clinton aides Cheryl Mills, Heather Samuelson, Brian Pagliano, or even Paul Combetta, the computer specialist who deleted Hillary Clinton's emails despite orders from Congress to preserve them. Had Roger been in the intelligence community, he would be enjoying a lavishly paid position on CNN right now like James Clapper. The entire system wields justice, not like the blind goddess, but like the hitman of some demonic mafia. It's a wasteland populated by monsters that hunger only for the blood of the uncorrupted. And in the fetid swamp of the American judicial system, there's no creature viler than Judge Amy Berman Jackson.